My sister's 33rd birthday party was supposed to be one of those rare evenings when our whole family laughed together without arguing. The restaurant buzzed with music, conversations, and clinking glasses while everyone gathered around her table. I had just finished chatting with one of our cousins when a sharp scream cut through the room. "My money is gone." Every conversation stopped. My sister rushed toward the gift table, digging through envelopes with shaking hands before turning straight toward me. Her finger locked on me without a second of doubt. She took it. She was standing here by herself. For a moment I couldn't even understand what she was saying. Then she shouted that $6,800 in birthday cash had disappeared. Dozens of faces swung toward me. Some guests reached for their phones. Others whispered behind their hands. Even our parents looked stunned, searching my face for an explanation I didn't know how to give. "I didn't take anything," I said quietly, but my voice disappeared beneath the growing noise. My sister kept repeating that I had been alone near the gifts only minutes earlier. The confidence in her voice made people believe her before anyone asked a single question. Someone announced they were calling 911, and I stood there frozen, wondering how my own family could turn against me so quickly. 20 minutes later, 2 police officers walked through those doors, and my sister smiled. She thought she'd already won. As I sat there waiting for the officers to ask their first questions, my mind kept drifting back over the past few weeks. At the time, nothing had seemed unusual. After everything that had just happened, those memories looked completely different. My sister and I had never been especially close, but we weren't enemies either. We grew up in the same house, shared birthdays, holidays, and family dinners like any other siblings. Somewhere along the way, though, our lives started moving in different directions. I built a steady career, paid off my debts, and eventually bought my own home. I wasn't wealthy, but I had worked hard to create a comfortable life for myself. Friends trusted me, coworkers respected me, and my family often came to me when they needed advice. My sister struggled with that difference more than I realized. Every family gathering seemed to turn into another silent competition. If I reached a milestone, she found a reason to dismiss it. If someone congratulated me, her mood changed almost instantly. I always assumed she was having a bad day. I never imagined those feelings were growing into something much darker. Our parents didn't mean to make things worse, but they often compared us without thinking. They would tell her she should be more responsible like me, or ask why she couldn't manage money the way I did. They probably believed they were encouraging her. Instead, every comparison seemed to push us further apart. Then there were the little moments that hadn't made sense before. A week before her birthday, she suddenly became unusually friendly, texting me almost every day and insisting she wanted us to reconnect. She even asked detailed questions about my work schedule and whether I planned to stay for the entire party. At the time, I thought she was trying to repair our relationship. She also kept reminding everyone that many guests would be bringing cash gifts because she was saving for a new business idea. She mentioned the amount several times, almost as if she wanted everyone to remember it. Looking back, those weren't random conversations at all. They felt more like pieces of a plan that had already begun long before I walked into that birthday party. When I replayed that evening in my mind, I realized the warning signs had been there from the moment I arrived. I had simply been too happy to notice them. The restaurant had reserved a private room with balloons, flowers, and long tables filled with family and friends. Music played softly while people greeted each other with hugs and birthday wishes. My sister welcomed everyone with a smile that seemed completely genuine. She hugged me tightly and thanked me for coming. It felt like we were finally putting years of tension behind us. Near the entrance stood a decorated table where guests placed cards, wrapped presents, and envelopes. I barely looked at it as I walked in, but my sister immediately called my name. "Can you help me keep everything organized?" she asked. "You're the only person I trust to make sure nothing gets mixed up." The request caught me off guard because she had never asked me to help at any family event before. Still, it sounded harmless, so I agreed. Every few minutes she found another reason to bring me back to the gift table. Sometimes she asked me to straighten the presents. Other times she wanted me to move a few envelopes into a basket or make room for more gifts. None of it took more than a minute, but I noticed she never asked anyone else. Each time I walked over, several guests could easily see us together. At the time, I assumed it was because the table sat near the center of the room. Now it felt intentional. A little later, she clapped her hands and announced it was time for family pictures. Instead of gathering everyone near the birthday cake or the decorated wall, she insisted we stand beside the gift table. One of our cousins laughed and said the background looks strange, but my sister refused to move. We smiled while dozens of photos were taken, with the gifts clearly visible behind us. Those pictures would later matter far more than anyone expected. As the evening continued, I noticed other moments that seemed ordinary then. My aunt commented that I had been helping my sister all night. A family friend joked that I looked like the unofficial party organizer. One of the restaurant servers thanked me because he assumed I was in charge of the gifts. Their words barely registered at the time. But every one of those people would later repeat those memories to the police. By the time dinner was served, I believed everything was going perfectly. I had no idea that every trip to that table, every photograph, and every casual conversation was quietly building a story that someone wanted the rest of the room to believe. The birthday cake arrived just after dinner, and the room filled with applause. The lights dimmed while everyone gathered around my sister. Phones were raised to record the moment as she smiled, made a wish, and blew out the candles. Children cheered, relatives sang off-key, and the photographer moved from one side of the room to the other, trying to capture every smile. Like everyone else, I was focused on the celebration. After the cake was served, people drifted back to their tables. Some lined up for coffee, while others stepped outside to take phone calls. The room became louder as conversations started again. It felt like the busiest part of the evening. Then, everything changed. A loud gasp echoed across the room. "My money!" my sister shouted. "Where's my money?" Every head turned toward the gift table. She hurried over, opening cards and lifting gift bags with shaking hands. At first, I thought she had misplaced something important. Then she looked directly at me. "It's gone," she said, her voice rising. "The 6,800 is gone." She didn't hesitate. She didn't ask if anyone had seen anything. She didn't wonder whether the envelopes had been moved. Instead, she pointed straight at me. She took it. The room fell silent. I could feel dozens of eyes fixed on me. People who had been laughing only seconds earlier now looked at me with suspicion. A few guests quietly stepped away, as if simply standing near me might somehow involve them. "What are you talking about?" I asked. "You were the only one around the gift table all night," she replied. "I trusted you, and this is what you did." The words spread through the room faster than I could answer. I heard whispers behind me. "I did see her over there. She was organizing the gifts. Maybe nobody else had the chance." Each comment made the situation worse. Our parents rushed over, both looking confused and frightened. My mother grabbed my arm. "Tell us the truth," she said. "If this is some misunderstanding, explain it now." My father looked at me without saying a word, waiting for an answer that would somehow fix everything. I knew raising my voice wouldn't help. Arguing with my sister in front of everyone would only make the scene uglier. So I stayed calm. "I didn't take your money," I said. "That's all I have to say." My quiet response didn't sound convincing to the people around us. Some took my silence as guilt instead of self-control. My sister, meanwhile, became louder with every sentence, repeating the accusation until it seemed to become the only version anyone believed. Someone announced that the police had been called. A heavy silence settled over the room as we waited. A few minutes later, the restaurant doors opened, and two uniformed officers walked inside. The two officers stepped into the private dining room and quickly took control of the situation. One introduced himself while the other asked everyone to remain where they were. The cheerful atmosphere disappeared completely. Music was turned off, conversations stopped, and the restaurant staff closed the doors to the room. "We need everyone to stay until we understand what happened," one officer said. "Please don't leave or discuss the incident with each other." A few guests complained because they had children waiting at home or early work the next morning, but nobody argued for long. It was clear the officers intended to speak with every person in the room. My sister was the first to give her statement. She sounded confident, almost rehearsed. She explained that guests had given her cash gifts throughout the evening, and that she had counted exactly 6,800 before placing the envelopes together. Then she repeated that I had been near the gift table several times, and insisted no one else had a reason to touch it. She spoke without hesitation, looking directly at the officers as though every detail had already been settled. When it was my turn, I answered every question as calmly as I could. I explained that my sister had repeatedly asked me to help organize the gifts, but I never opened a single envelope or handled anyone's money. I told them exactly where I had been during the party, and mentioned the relatives who had spoken with me throughout the evening. I didn't accuse my sister of lying. I simply described what I remembered. The officers listened without interrupting, writing careful notes after each answer. They continued interviewing every guest one by one. Some remembered seeing me near the gift table, just as my sister had said. Others recalled that she was the one constantly asking me to go there. Several people admitted they hadn't been paying close attention because they were talking, eating, or taking pictures. As the interviews continued, one detective slowly walked around the room instead of joining the conversations. He studied the gift table, the chairs, the decorations, and even the floor. His attention seemed drawn to details everyone else ignored. Every few minutes he glanced toward my sister before looking back at the area where the gifts had been placed. Just then, the restaurant manager approached the officers. "I think you should know," she said. "Our private rooms are covered by security cameras. If you need the footage, we can pull it up right away." The detective nodded without saying much. A short time later, after hearing several statements and learning about the cameras, he closed his notebook and looked directly at my sister. "There is one thing I still don't understand," he said. "Can you explain how you knew the exact total of 6,800 before anyone had finished opening or counting all of the birthday cards?" For the first time that night, the confidence disappeared from her face. The restaurant manager led the officers into a small office where the security recordings were stored. Everyone else remained in the private dining room, waiting in complete silence. No one laughed anymore. The birthday decorations suddenly felt out of place, hanging above a room filled with nervous faces. Several minutes later, the officers returned with serious expressions. They didn't announce what they had found, but the way they looked at my sister told me something had changed. One detective asked everyone to stay seated while he reviewed a few details. "The video doesn't fully match the timeline we were given," he said calmly. A quiet murmur spread across the room. My sister quickly interrupted. "Maybe one of the cameras missed something." The detective didn't argue. Instead, he continued speaking with the guests one by one. Without realizing it, people began correcting parts of my sister's story. My aunt remembered that my sister had walked to the gift table alone just before the cake was brought out. One cousin recalled seeing her carrying a small white envelope only moments before everyone gathered to sing. Another guest said, "I had been talking with him near the dessert table during part of the time my sister claimed I was standing alone by the gifts." None of them were trying to defend me. They were simply answering honestly. Little by little, the story my sister had told started losing its shape. Then one of the restaurant employees stepped forward. "I think I remembered something," the young server said. The detective invited him to speak. "A few minutes before the cake, I accidentally bumped into the birthday girl while clearing empty plates. She asked me not to touch the gift table because she said she was reorganizing some envelopes herself." The room became completely still. That single sentence changed everything. Until then, my sister had insisted nobody except me had handled the gifts. Now there was an independent witness who remembered seeing her doing exactly that. The detective wrote down every word before asking the server if he was certain. "I'm sure," he replied. She even laughed and said she wanted everything to look neat before the family photos. The detective slowly closed his notebook. He no longer turned toward me when asking questions. Instead, he faced my sister. "Can you explain why you told us you never returned to the gift table after asking your sister to help, when both the video and a staff member placed you there several minutes later?" She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Around the room, I noticed people exchanging uncertain looks. The same relatives who had believed the accusation without hesitation were now questioning everything they had heard. For the first time that night, it seemed possible that I hadn't been trapped by a thief's mistake. I had been trapped by someone's plan. The detective asked my sister to step into a quieter corner of the room, while another officer continued examining the area around the gift table. Nobody spoke. Every guest watched in complete silence, waiting to see what would happen next. A few minutes later, one of the officers walked toward a decorative cabinet that had been placed against the wall beside the gifts. It held extra napkins, party supplies, and a few unopened boxes. He opened the lower door, reached behind a stack of decorations, and pulled out a thick white envelope secured with a rubber band. My sister's face immediately lost its color. The detective carefully counted the money in front of two witnesses. 6,800, he said. No one moved. The officer then asked the restaurant manager a simple question. "Who had access to this cabinet tonight?" "The guests couldn't open it," she answered. "It stays unlocked only for staff or for the person hosting the event. Your sister asked if she could use it earlier to store a few personal items." That answer changed everything. I had never gone near that cabinet. In fact, I hadn't even noticed it during the party. The only person who had permission to use it was my sister. The detective quietly requested her phone. After explaining the situation, she handed it over. While reviewing recent messages, the officers found a conversation that immediately caught their attention. Several texts had been exchanged with one of her closest friends earlier that week. I'm finally going to expose her. Everyone thinks she's perfect. After this party, they'll see who she really is. One final message, sent just hours before the celebration, made the room feel even colder. Just wait until tonight. She's walking straight into it. The detective looked up from the screen and asked no further questions. The messages spoke for themselves. Years of frustration suddenly made sense. It had never been about the missing money. It wasn't even about the birthday party. My sister had spent years measuring her life against mine. Every compliment I received, every achievement I celebrated, and every moment our parents praised me had become another reason for her resentment to grow. Instead of dealing with those feelings, she had chosen to destroy my reputation. The silence inside the room became almost unbearable. My mother covered her mouth as tears filled her eyes. My father slowly lowered his head, unable to look at either of us. Around the room, the same relatives who had whispered about me only half an hour earlier now couldn't meet my eyes. One by one, they looked away, embarrassed by how quickly they had believed the accusation without asking for proof. I didn't feel victorious. I only realized that the person who had tried hardest to ruin my life had been my own sister. The detective placed the recovered envelope on the table and looked at my sister with a calm expression. His voice remained steady as he explained what would happen next. Making a false report is a serious matter, he said. Trying to place the blame on someone you know can carry additional legal consequences. We still need to complete our investigation, so you'll need to come with us to answer more questions. The room was so quiet that I could hear someone setting down a coffee cup across the room. My sister didn't argue this time. She didn't point at me again or insist she was telling the truth. The confidence she had shown only an hour earlier had disappeared completely. She looked around the room as if she expected someone to defend her, but no one spoke. One of the officers gently guided her toward the exit. She paused for a moment and glanced back at our parents, but they stood frozen where they were. My mother began crying before the door even closed. She kept whispering that she didn't understand how everything had fallen apart so quickly. My father remained silent, staring at the floor with a look I had never seen before. He wasn't angry anymore. He simply looked heartbroken. In a single evening, he had watched one daughter falsely accused and the other accused of planning it herself. For a long time, nobody moved. Then my aunt slowly walked over to me. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I should have waited for the facts before judging you." A cousin followed behind her. I believed what I heard because it sounded convincing. I was wrong. One by one, several relatives apologized. None of them tried to excuse their actions. They admitted they had accepted the accusation without asking a single question. Their words were sincere, but they couldn't erase what I had felt while everyone looked at me as though I were a criminal. I thanked them politely, but I didn't know what else to say. The birthday decorations still filled the room. Half-eaten slices of cake remained on the tables, and unopened gifts sat where they had been left. Only an hour earlier, this had been a family celebration. Now it felt like a place filled with broken trust. I picked up my handbag and quietly walked toward the door. No one tried to stop me. I wasn't leaving because I had won. There was nothing to celebrate. The truth had cleared my name, but it couldn't undo the moment my own family believed the worst about me. As I stepped outside into the cool night air, I realized that justice doesn't always feel like victory. Sometimes it simply gives you the strength to walk away with your dignity still intact. Several weeks passed before my life began to feel normal again. The police investigation continued, and I returned to work, trying to focus on the things I could control. My coworkers knew something difficult had happened, but I kept the details to myself. I had spent enough time defending my name. I didn't want the rest of my life to revolve around that one terrible evening. The first time I heard from my sister wasn't through a phone call or a text message. Instead, a letter arrived from her lawyer. It explained that the legal process was still ongoing and asked that any future communication about the incident go through their office. The language was formal and distant, as though we were strangers instead of sisters who had shared the same childhood. A few days later, another envelope arrived. This one was handwritten. My sister admitted she had let years of jealousy control her decisions. She wrote that every comparison, every compliment I received, and every moment she felt overlooked had slowly filled her with resentment. She claimed she never expected everything to become so serious. According to her, she believed people would suspect me for a while, then the truth would somehow come out without lasting damage. Reading those words hurt more than I expected. She hadn't acted in a single moment of anger. She had planned it and convinced herself that humiliating me was worth the risk. Not long afterward, our parents asked if we could meet. We sat around their dining room table, the same place where we had celebrated birthdays and holidays for years. Neither of them tried to defend what had happened. My father spoke first. "We missed the signs," he admitted. "We thought the comparisons would motivate both of you. We never realized they were creating resentment." My mother wiped away tears as she nodded. "We should have stopped treating your successes like they were a scoreboard." Hearing those words mattered, but they couldn't erase the memories of that night. I appreciated their honesty because it was the first time they accepted responsibility instead of pretending everything had been a misunderstanding. As for my sister, I chose to let go of my anger. Carrying it would only keep me tied to what she had done. But forgiveness didn't mean pretending nothing had happened. The relationship we once had was gone. Family dinners became smaller. Holidays were planned differently. Conversations were more careful, and everyone seemed to choose their words with greater thought than before. I still loved my family, but I understood something I hadn't known before. Love can survive betrayal. Trust cannot. Once it's broken, it isn't restored by apologies alone. It returns only through honest actions, and that takes far longer than saying, "I'm sorry." Several months have passed since that birthday party, yet I still remember every detail as if it happened yesterday. The sound of my sister's voice, the shocked faces around the room, and the silence that followed the accusations still come back to me from time to time. Those memories no longer control my life, but they remind me how quickly everything can change. People often ask what the hardest part of that night was. They usually expect me to say it was being accused of stealing or standing in front of police officers while everyone watched. The truth is, neither of those moments hurt the most. The deepest pain came from looking into the faces of people I had loved my entire life, and realizing how quickly they accepted the accusation. They didn't ask for evidence. They didn't wonder if there might be another explanation. In just a few seconds, years of trust disappeared because one confident voice pointed in my direction. That lesson stayed with me far longer than the investigation itself. For a while, I wondered if I should have shouted louder or defended myself more aggressively. Maybe I should have argued with my sister or demanded everyone believe me. But as I looked back, I realized that losing control would only have added more confusion. Remaining calm gave the investigators room to focus on facts instead of emotions. The truth didn't need the loudest voice. It needed patience. Evidence spoke when people finally stopped making assumptions. The security footage, the witness statements, the hidden envelope, and the text messages all told the same story. None of those things could have been changed by my anger or frustration. The experience also changed the way I see trust. Today, I pay closer attention to how people respond during difficult moments. It's easy for someone to stand beside you when life is going well. The real test comes when doubts appear and everyone else begins to question your character. Despite everything, I refuse to let bitterness define my future. I still believe in kindness, but I also believe in healthy boundaries. I no longer feel responsible for fixing relationships that others choose to damage. What happened at that party took away my sense of security, but it also gave me something valuable. It taught me that my character is not determined by someone else's accusation. It is revealed by how I respond when my integrity is challenged. If there's one lesson I carry forward, it's this. Sometimes the loudest accusation isn't the truth. It's the last, desperate move of someone afraid they're losing the comparison they've been fighting their whole life.